Welcome to the second viewing where love wins every time. I'm Dan.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Devin.
Shaka bruh.
Today on the cast, we got our friend Devin here. We're going to talk about the film Back to the Future. So, Devin, what's your thoughts on Back to the Future? Why did you want to come on the cast and talk about this film this week?
Back to the Future was just like one of the first series movies that I ever watched. Started watching it when I was about 10, and I just really thought that it was an enjoyable film for like anyone of all ages. Like if you're 10, you can enjoy it, or if you're 40, you can enjoy it.
That's true. I feel like a lot of these films back in the day kind of had that feeling towards it. I mean, you can definitely take away from like some like adult themes, but also like some like childlike whimsy that comes from these kind of films, especially in the 80s. I feel like the 80s got away with being really dark for kids' films.
And I think it's really interesting to watch it as a kid and then go back and watch it as an adult and see what changes and like how it's different, how the humor changes for you, like the things that you notice instead.
Right.
I mean, because when you're a kid, you're probably just fascinated with the fact that he's going back in time and the fact that Michael J. Fox is cool as shit sliding on the top of the DeLorean.
Literally, this guy's the coolest fucking guy on earth in this film. Honestly, I don't know a single human cooler than Marty McFly. If you can find one, please hit me up at the second viewing at Twitter, and I'll give you $5. We'll collectively give you $5 if you can find a cooler human. I'm serious.
Because like on our own we don't have $5, but like together we can come up with $5. We'll get you $5. Don't worry. Like there's gonna be some Canadian Tire money in there. Don't worry about it. It works. Anyways,
a side note. Marty McFly is the coolest person on earth, but I'm interested in your thoughts on the first in the series, because like I'll be honest with you, I always kind of was a little bit more inclined to Back to the Future Part 2 for a long time though. Like for most of my life.
Me too.
Until recently.
Yeah. Until recently, yeah. After like rewatching Back to the Future after quite a few years, the first, I couldn't help but compare it to the second, which was up until yesterday my favorite.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I gotta say, I think the first part is taking a seat as favorite in Dan's house.
Wow, that sounds like a great house to be in. I'm pretty sure. For me, like I actually watched Part 2 not terribly long ago because it was kind of that. I think it was in November last year. They had that thing where, or it was late October, where it was the actual date they traveled to.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was on TV, so I'd watched Part 2, and I still love Part 2. Don't get me wrong, but like, it feels dated in a way because their idea of the future is so like. It's so campy and out there that you can still appreciate it, but it just feels...
It's just not accurate at all.
It's not accurate at all, and it takes you out of it, you know? Like,
yeah.
But this film, on the other hand, going back to like the 50s, it feels exactly like as if you would imagine the 50s to be. Or like I guess that like idealized American version of the 50s. It's heartwarming in a very strange and like comforting way. I don't know. This film surprised me in a lot of ways, even though I've already seen this before, but like this is a second viewing, so like bringing it back and seeing it again for the second time around, or even multiple viewings, we really, especially like you bringing this to our attention here, Devin, you were like, hey, Dan, Kyle, you guys want to check out Back to the Future? Because we're talking about movies to maybe discuss on the cast here, and I'll be honest with you, I was a little apprehensive at first, only because I love the second one so much. I'm nothing against Back to the Future as a series, but I was like, number 2 is like pretty good though, dude. Like,
yeah, well, I think the first was the logical place to start, really. And
totally.
We should potentially think about doing the second one at some point. But one thing I do want to bring up before we get into the film a little bit too much was, well, actually, you know what? Fuck it. Let's jump right in.
Just want to jump right in?
Let's jump right in. I got a question. What was something that you noticed as a kid that you, or you noticed as an adult that you didn't as a kid? That I did after watching the movie again semi recently.
Devin, what's your thoughts on this one?
Not entirely sure here.
I think you brought up a good point earlier when we were talking about the Pines, when Marty McFly goes back and he's at Twin Pines Mall and then he ends up running over One Pine Tree or whatever the sign or something like that. I think that was a cool thing that I never noticed until this time around after having seen it, you know,
there's a lot
5
of
or
things
6
like
years
that. You're
later.
right, man. That's a pretty cool one. Devin, you were telling us about that earlier. For me, I think it's just how much I forgot Marty McFly was a badass. I'm gonna stand by that. Like he's cool. Number 2.
It all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
I want that like red like poofy vest so bad right now. I just want to wear that everywhere I go.
I just want to drive a DeLorean everywhere, honestly.
Yeah, why would you want like that?
Seriously.
This movie's so unreal. Like it's really iconic in a way. Like when we were talking about Star Wars a couple weeks back, like talking about because I had rewatched Star Wars I watched Star Wars for the first time in preparation for Force Awakens, and like the thing about those movies for me was that they were so iconic in a way that I I knew what those scenes were about before I even saw the film.
Right.
And for me, it wasn't like, okay, I know what's going on. But this is still so iconic, but still feels so fresh when I watch it. And I think that's one thing that Back to the Future does like really well. This is a time in like when blockbusters were just like, not only were they blockbusters to kind of like appeal to a mass audience or like make a lot of money, but they were great films. I mean, not that blockbusters we see nowadays aren't necessarily great films, but they definitely are focused on hitting demographics as opposed to still like creating art, creating a great experience for the viewer. And Back to the Future is just a great series to like show, I think.
Well, I think it's a pretty unique idea too.
Totally. And like I think I don't know, like I guess maybe to answer your question again, Dan, here, like I forgot how affectionate Marty's mom is when he goes to the past.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's very uncomfortable, but like the way the humor works, they play off that in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fun to watch.
Man, another thing that we totally looked past, or I at least looked past when I was a kid, was that the fact that there's a near rape scene in this movie.
Yeah, man. There's
like Lorraine, like
it
Biff
gets
rapes
real
Lorraine.
intense there.
Yeah.
like Biff. What a piece of shit. Like honestly, that
Way
was
too much aggression there.
That was strange. I agree. I did not like really fully realize what I was viewing as a child, but that was weird and wasn't really into that. That being said, the movie is pretty good. I would still recommend watching this. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, you should check them out. I think. Like I said, but anyways, let's jump into like you were saying. Back to the Future. This is a 1985 film directed by Robert Zemeckis, produced by Steven Spielberg. It's a big budget film.
Oh yeah, what's the budget on this film? You're keeping it a secret.
Okay, the budget on this film is $19 million. Just in case anyone's keeping score, Jack and Jill cost $80, so we'll keep it there for now.
Wasn't Jack and Jill like 88?
80. Well, 79 if you want to be.
Oh, okay.
I go 80 because I feel like
safe to round up.
Sandler asked for an extra grand last minute, definitely.
Yeah.
Or extra mil last minute. But I mean, box office, what it grossed was huge, of course, close to $400 million. This movie's
crazy.
This movie's like, and this
success.
is adjusted for inflation as well. So I mean, 19 million back then was like, it seems smaller to us now in a way, but 19 million in 1985 was a lot of money.
Right.
That being said, it still made tons and tons of money.
Yeah.
But it's just funny to compare any film to Jack and Jill as far as I'm concerned.
Let's talk about like some favorite scenes. I think it's safe to say that we're all pretty big fans of this movie, and so let's talk about some favorite scenes. Devin,
Right.
what was your favorite scene in this movie?
I think one of the best scenes in the movie is near the end. When Doc gets shot in the parking lot, and of course Marty thinks he's dead because he left him the note and he said he wasn't gonna read it, but he ends up bringing out the bulletproof vest and he's alive. I mean it's soft, but I thought it's a pretty good scene.
It is a good scene, and I mean
it's just like so happy.
And there's one cool thing this film does really well, where like everything just ties. It's like everything fits into place, and nothing feels forced. And even when there is like a plot device, it doesn't feel as if it's like being shoved in your face. And like that's a great example of things coming together really well.
Yeah, like or for example, when Marty McFly's girlfriend, her name's Jennifer, right? When Jennifer writes her grandma's telephone number down on the back of that Save the Bell tower.
Right. Yeah.
Page that ends up becoming hugely significant because that's how he gets back to the future.
Right. Shaka
bra. But Kyle, what was your favorite scene in this movie?
My favorite scene, it's a very small part, but I'll be honest. My favorite scene is literally Marty McFly just standing by that Pepsi machine with a bottle of Pepsi in his hand. And then his dad comes, picks up the bottle, and just opens it up, and they run into the cafe there. I don't know why, but that just got me. I was like, this is just so cool. This movie it's really interesting because, I don't know, we were kind of talking this yesterday, Dan, about how obsessed people in the 80s seemed with 50s culture.
Right.
And you can kind of compare that to now how we're so obsessed with 90s and 80s culture.
Yeah.
And I guess I can kind of picture myself maybe being my age in 1985 watching this film and just being like, oh man, the 50s, that just seems so cool. That's so like... I just feel like they capture that essence really well. Maybe that's not... You may not even consider that a complete scene, but for me, that just like... It shows how well they captured the feel and look of that era. Yeah. In a really awesome way. And I mean, I don't know how many times you have to say, but Marty McFly is just the coolest motherfucker in this movie. Like, seriously, he's so cool.
That's true. That's true.
But there's a lot of great scenes too, and I think one thing I like about this film a lot is just the use of practical effects. But I mean, that's also that's also of the era, right? I mean, now we have this big argument between what's CGI and what's practical, and when to use CGI and when not to use it. But back then, it was just practical, and you had the odd CGI effect Which actually, at the end of this film, there's one very significant one that was pretty groundbreaking at the time, where like the car flies up and whips out that great line, "Where we go, we don't need roads."
Yeah.
It's like so awesome. This movie's so cheesy in a way, but like it does it in the best way possible.
Oh man, it captures it perfectly. It's just like, because I bet you when you were watching that movie in 1980, like when you were watching that back in the day, it didn't come across cheesy.
Not at all.
Like,
No.
you know, it was just like very classic lines. They're cheesy to us now because they were so classic.
Right, and I guess that's what I was talking about earlier with like when a film's so iconic and you go back to view it, kind of like Osama in Star Wars. You're right. It's like I feel like there's a lot other movies in this, like, maybe not genre, but this time period where like it's too cheesy. But this movie found that balance to make it like timeless, which was really interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but what about you? What's your favorite scene?
Oh, my favorite scene is when Marty McFly punches, like he tells Biff to look the other way in the milkshake cafe, punches him in the face and dips out the door, and there's that chase scene while he's on a skateboard. That's my favorite scene for sure.
When he grabs like what is that, like a scooter of some kind, or some sort of like whatever wooden thing that kid's riding.
Yeah, it's like an early version of a scooter.
He
Something
to a skateboard
like that.
because that is literally how cool Marty McFly is.
Yeah.
Like, you like ask Dan. I was losing my shit last night watching this movie.
Yeah.
Like, he was so cool in my mind, and I always knew Marty McFly was like an interesting character for sure.
He like smiles at the girls that are all watching him in the cafe as he's like, you know, getting away on his skateboard.
He's like, he plays it so cool, and it works. It works for him. Honestly.
Yeah.
It really works for him. He doesn't shove his coolness in your face, which I feel like most like new age cool guy characters definitely do. They're either like a cool guy and they know it, or they're just like an asshole.
I think he knows he's pretty cool though. He's
Does
playing
he, though?
I think he's got to know. He's way too badass for him not to know he's cool. Though.
The guy hangs out with Doc Brown though. That's another point I want to bring up.
That's true. Yeah.
Like
that relationship just in general is just so weird.
Yeah.
Right?
We talked about this a little bit
7-year-old
last
dude
night.
hanging out with a high school kid, like
it's strange.
Right,
Yeah.
but like if you think about it in the context of, you know, past and future, he essentially first met Doc Brown in 1955, right?
Right.
Which could be the contributing reason to why
He knows him in the first place.
they know him. They know each other in the first place.
he's still old in 1955 though. It's still kind of weird.
That's
Right.
right. That's a good point.
True, but like you know what I mean? It's like he. You know, it's cyclical. So
yeah,
he's in
full circle.
he's in 1985. He hops back to 1955 to say, you know, and he knows Doc Brown, goes to find him. That's essentially when Doc Brown meets him, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily when Marty McFly meets Doc Brown.
No, that's really true. I think, yeah.
So like, yeah, but you're right. The relationship itself it seems a little bit weird, but
I'm not weirded out by it as much. I just think it's so interesting. Like,
Just from like an outside perspective though, just like looking at a 7-year-old dude hanging out with a
that's true.
with a high school kid, it's pretty weird.
like
I
now
wanna
it
know the
seems
backstory.
questionable.
I want to know the backstory. That's more or less what I want. I want to know why. Like, where's the prequel at? I want a prequel. You know, I want to see
Yeah.
what's going on with that. But yeah, honestly, Doc Brown, portrayed by Christopher Lloyd in this film, he's amazing. He's so zany. All of his one-liners are like the way he describes a school dance is like a musical gathering or musical ritual gathering or something like that.
A ritualistic,
Musical gathering.
Yeah.
It's just the little quips he
hilarious.
does are really quite funny, and
You really, we were talking about this too last night. We were saying that nobody has really pulled off a mad scientist type character like Doc Brown.
right. And I think if there has been in the past, I guess 30 years now, over 30 years, they've been based off Doc Brown as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, or at least take elements from.
Totally. I think a mad scientist is a cool trope that should come back in film.
Yeah,
you don't
me
get a lot
too.
of mad scientists anymore.
Yeah.
I want that to be a thing again. Whether it's in comedy or whatever, I don't know, but I think Mad Scientist is pretty good.
Such a
We'll
cool
see how
character.
Ghostbusters does the reboot. We'll see how that goes. If you were listening to this before that comes out, please just let us know what it was like.
Oh, and guys, always pay attention for our next week's cast. Is going to be Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
Yeah, not the first one, but the sequel. That'll be next week. But anyways, we'll get to that later. So more into Back to the Future here. So anyways, I guess the main premise of this film is we do have Marty McFly, played by Michael J. Fox, goes back into the future, sort of in a way to escape from being shot by Syrians, which, by the way, I forgot that was part of this film.
Right, me too.
And he's in this time machine by Doc Brown created this machine, I guess.
And there previously, like Doc Brown was talking about, excuse me, historical dates.
Yes.
And he plugs in 1955 for whatever reason, a few days before the clock tower goes off or gets struck by lightning. And it's still set to that time by the time Marty hits 88 miles per hour and off
Because
Marty is.
that's the day he discovered time travel.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get those 1.21 gigawatts to get that power going. And, so he gets back into the future. He goes back in time. And he goes to 1955. God, I don't know what I'm talking about. He goes to 1955. And he's dazed and confused. He has no idea what's going on. He thinks it's a dream. He thinks maybe he died in the car crash of some kind. But essentially he goes back in time, but it's still in the same city that he was born in. His same, he kind of sees his soon-to-be suburb or neighborhood being initially built, and like he's very confused as to what's going on. But it's cool to see, I guess, maybe the first like roughly 15-20 minutes of the film being established, and then getting that flipped on its head immediately. And like that initial level of creativity is quite fun, I think, to enjoy. Because you get to see how these characters are different. You get to see, his mother, his father, and Biff, the antagonist in this film. And
you almost get to see 3 different time periods, right? Because in the beginning, the community and, the house he lives in is different than the community he returns to at the end of the movie. So you almost see like 3 different periods in time
I would say that for sure, because I feel like the current time, 1980, the second version of 1985 definitely feels like a different period, especially in the second film, I would say.
Right.
So I would agree with that for sure. But yeah, so while he's in the past, he kind of just stumbles upon, people that are in his life and whatnot, and nutty hijinks ensues. But I think more or less just the idea of like what time travel is and how it can affect the future is obviously the biggest point of this film, and how the plot progresses. So essentially his mother ends up falling in love with himself. Marty, the son of his mother. And
can we also just take a second to like appreciate the fact that his dad is kind of a pervert when it's back to 1955.
He's a peeping Tom. That is true.
Just sitting in the tree with his binoculars. That's pretty.
It's so strange. Like those little things. Like
it's another thing you just don't really think about.
Yeah, and it's funny that
when you're younger.
Yeah, it's funny that. Like by fate, and like when his mom originally tells the story in the first version of 1985, she tells it that she met George when he was falling out of a tree. Her dad or grandfather hit him after he was falling out of a tree or something like that.
And it seemed as if he never actually told her what the full story was, kind of thing.
Right.
One thing that's kind of cool, I mean not cool, but interesting about that is like, I feel like him being a peeping Tom, being a bit of a perv, it doesn't define him as a character in this film. It's more so just part of his character. I feel like if this film was made today, it'd be like, oh, he's a perv. That is what he is. He's the pervy guy in the movie now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
It just kind of stick throughout the entire film.
Exactly. But here, it was just part of his character. They kind of like set it aside. I mean, you still kind of feel weird about it, but
it kind of shows his interest in girls, and the fact that like he does want to take interest in a girl, but he says it in the movie he's not ready, and he's too into his science fiction novels and writing essays for Biff. So
wow, Biff also a great dude, right? Honestly, Biff, great
solid
guy.
Dude. He might be the biggest douchebag in film history. Like, holy shit.
I would go as far as to say that's correct, honestly. I can't think of a worse person. Except maybe like Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. Other than that, I think this guy is definitely up there. Well, he will drink your milkshake.
And dude, the scene where Marty McFly comes home in the original version of 1985 before he comes back to the future. He comes home excited to use the car, excited for his date tomorrow with Jennifer. He's going to take her up to the lake, and the car is smashed. He walks in, and Biff is his dad's boss, saying, "Oh, you didn't tell me there was a blind spot in your car, and I fucking crashed it, spilled beer all over myself." Oh yeah, rubbing it in his face.
Drunk
then
driving.
Grabs him by the neck, says, "You better have that."
A small detail that you don't really notice if you really think about it.
Oh, when he's leaving, he just grabs another beer too. What? You got light beer for me? Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Biff. Like, great dude.
And while he's there, he's just giving George shit the whole time. Like, pulls his necktie, knocks on his head, just like he did in high school. And we see that when Marty goes back.
And you get that line from the principal too. It's like, McFly never amounted to nothing, or
slacker McFly.
Yeah. He says the same thing to his dad as he did him.
And then I guess that's pretty interesting to think about how the back and forth between like I said, like the first 15-20 minutes, you get so much of the scenery, you get so much of the setting, but yet you can kind of realize where these characters have come from. The character development is very subtle but very effective.
Right.
And when it comes back to, or when they go.
Even with Jennifer, the girlfriend, right? Like you get a sense of who she is in some degree, for sure. Like when she's trying to bail Marty when he's late for class and says, "Oh, the bald principal's looking for you. Like come around this way."
That's another thing. Of course, Marty McFly just has like the coolest girlfriend. Yeah. Like, and not only is she like good looking, but she's also like super. Like this guy just has everything. Marty
McFly has it together. Yeah, for sure.
He definitely does. Although I will say, like near the end of the film, I feel like Jennifer's character just felt kind of like they just like had to quickly write a couple lines for her to make the movie end.
Just trying to fill her in.
Just trying to fill her in pretty quick. But I would agree with you. Like
she's reintroduced in the second movie, and she does well, I'd say.
That I would agree, but I mean, she's
also played by a different character in the second movie with her.
That's
true. It's kind of odd, but
that is weird. That
was an 80s Actually, I never really noticed that until you mentioned it.
Yeah,
wow.
It's a different actress.
Yeah. They try to play it off like it's no big deal, but it's like
that's an 80s thing, man. You ever watch like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Yeah. They like change the mom, and you're like, oh, you'll never know. Anyway. But I think looking back at how things have changed throughout the film, I guess maybe that's a trope that's happened in like tons of movies since, like time travel movies. It's kind of their own genre in a way. There's a lot of that going on, or even maybe like body switching movies, like 17 Again. Great film. I'm serious. I actually like 17
Yeah,
Again.
me too.
It's pretty good.
Matthew Perry kills in that movie.
He does, yeah. Actually, so does Zac Efron.
Actually, we hated Zac Efron until that movie.
Actually, that scene where he throws the leather jacket over his shoulder when he gets out of the car.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a Marty McFly moment, yeah.
Yeah, like it's pretty close. Anyways, I stand by that. Yeah, I think, like we were saying, though, just the way the characters are kind of seamlessly integrated into the actual setting of the film is really cool. And the setting alone is awesome. Like, the 50s in this movie just looks like a hip to jive kind of place. Like, it looks like a lot of fun, honestly.
It's just typical what you think the 50s would be.
Yeah, you're totally right. Like, it's what you think it would be, but I think...
It's like stereotypical, but... accurate at the same time.
Milkshakes and glasses of chocolate milks and malt shops and I think they show, what is it, a Texaco gas station. There's a team of 5 guys just waiting to stand by.
Yeah, they look like a pit crew almost. Like it's just kind of strange. But at the same time though, the movie takes time to kind of almost look at like political issues too, like who's gonna become mayor in the future, and like it takes time to look at those little details, and like some of them are like hidden very well, and you kind of have to like seek them out yourself. But at the same time, there's these little details that didn't really have to be mentioned in the script that they choose to elaborate on, which is kind of cool, like the end of the sea dance, or the chanting of the sea dance, and little things like that they kind of brilliantly set up. And like I think we kind of brought this up earlier, just how well this movie fits piece to piece throughout. It
just flows perfectly. Everything.
Yeah, it does.
Everything relates to each other, and that's why it's so good.
It is really good.
That's why everyone loves it.
Yeah, everything comes full circle. Everything makes sense. There isn't a scene that really doesn't make sense. Matter of fact, the scene that maybe doesn't make the most sense is when Marty McFly's grabbing a Pepsi. Even that fits beautifully.
Honestly, I think that's the best scene. But I see what you're saying. Honestly, I understand where you're coming from.
It's like it's the most random shot in there, but it's beautiful.
Or like when he happens to know how to play guitar. He just happens to shred guitar. Honestly, like I love Marty McFly. I can't get enough of the dude. Honestly, Michael Fassbender, watch out. But yeah, I think that's a good point. The film does flow really well, and even looking at like the events of like the clock tower and how well that was established so quickly, like,
and even at the start how it's mentioned and then it just comes back, and that so happens how he gets back to the future.
Yeah. It
also the best fourth wall break we've seen in recent months in this film. Sub Deadpool. Yeah, it's pretty. It does a great job at that, though. It does a great job in like kind of mentioning to the audience what they've already seen and like flipping on its head, and like
just like reiterating what's going on.
Yeah, and like when they do run into trouble, it really does feel like there's an issue. It's not just like a fake problem, like typical superhero problem. Oh, save the damsel in distress, but we all know it's going to work out because this guy's got superpowers, blah, blah. It's nothing like that.
No.
Like when they run into problems, for example, Marty and his family start disappearing from the photo. You really feel that like, holy shit, Marty's got to get his shit going and get his parents falling in love here. Or, when Doc Brown is on the top of the clock tower trying to plug in the wire so that they can channel the thunderstorm.
Get those 121 gigawatts.
Or just the fact that they don't have plutonium and they don't know how they're going to get back.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, that's an issue that we probably would have never thought of, right? Like,
true.
You know what I mean? Like,
I guess that's actually a good point. I think this movie does a really good job at putting that like level of urgency or like the stakes.
Keeping you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, like, the stakes are on the line for sure, especially in the last 15 minutes of the film. Like
it never gets too comfortable with itself. It's always like consistently reminding you that there's a goal in mind. There's some stuff that's got to happen.
That's true. Even when like Marty gets run over by his mom's or his grandfather's car, I guess.
Yeah.
He wakes up in his mom's bed. This is just getting weird. And he's like, "Oh, what an awful dream!" And like he hears his mom's voice, and like that's a really funny scene. Honestly, she's like patting his head and like taking care of him and whatnot, like as his mom normally would, but just ends up being this, I guess, this teenage girl. And yeah, like you're right. There are little things like that kind of connect the film in a really cool way.
And like, even when he gets back, like after the main plot line is solved, he gets back. All of a sudden, Doc Brown shows up again. Urgently grabbing some stuff from the trash bin to fuel the DeLorean.
Yeah.
And
let's talk about the DeLorean really quick, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? What do you think of that as like a symbol of the film? Because I feel like when people look back at Back to the Future, they definitely think of the DeLorean.
It's a pretty badass looking car.
Yeah.
And the doors.
Yeah, the suicide. Are those suicide doors or are those? What do they call those doors? There's suicide doors that go like alongside the car, right? And then there's those other ones that like open like spaceship doors. You know what I'm talking about? I could not tell
you.
We'll have to fact check that and get back.
We'll do a quick fact check during the breaker for you there, but actually, you know what? We'll probably take a breaker right now. We'll catch you guys right after the breaker.
Yeah. And we're back, guys. When we left, we were talking about the doors on the DeLorean. Kyle did a quick fact check for us. And Kyle, what kind of doors were those?
We got some gull wing doors. The DeLorean, in fact, has gull wing doors. And may I just mention that the rest of this podcast is sponsored by Athabasca Basin Development. It's a great cause we want to support, a great cause we want to mention out there.
Thanks, Athabasca Basin.
I feel like the guys at Athabasca Basin probably have gull wing doors.
They probably do. I mean, those guys are really.
They have probably a Mercedes-Benz 300 SL.
I kind of think that they're a little bit more humble than that. They're the type of guys that are driving, Honda Civics, 1994s.
But with gull wing doors.
Yes, with gull wing doors. Anyways, let's move on and talk about the rest of Back to the Future. I think there's a few points that we didn't hit that we really should. Kyle, do you have a couple of thoughts to bring in?
Well, I guess as we're kind of mentioning near the end of the film here, or coming towards the end of the film, points that we've kind of started to bring up previous. I think it's interesting to talk about just how the things change as soon as Marty comes back to, I guess, present day 1985.
Right.
And it's fun to see kind of his life become like 5 times better. Like everything that kind of seemed like lackluster at the beginning of the film automatically is like a lot better. His father's so like proud of himself, has a lot more confidence.
Yeah, they revisit all the characters in the family because in the beginning the mom was an alcoholic or like drinking a lot at least.
Drinking heavily.
And
she's on that functioning vibe, that kind of thing.
The functioning vibe. And the daughter was looking for a date and was having trouble finding them. And then the son was, I think he was complaining about his uniform or his job or not wanting to go to work.
Kind of like a
fast food type.
Fast food type job. Yeah. And so we see a conversation between his brother and his sister, and they're talking about how he can't keep track of her boyfriends anymore, and then eventually how he always wears a suit to the office. And so you can tell things have just improved for the whole family all around, especially George and Lorraine.
Although now that I think about it, I will bring this up. I feel like it's a little bit depressing knowing that just because the father became successful, that means that the rest of the family is happy. If his father wasn't successful, that means that his family was in the dumps.
I like to think that it's not because of his success that his family's happier, but because of, one of the things that Marty said to him when he went back in time and met him. He said, if you believe it can happen, anything's possible, or something along those lines, right? And he gained
to it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he gained some form of self-confidence after that night, and things really start looking up for.
I think
for
George. Right. That seems like what the movie is definitely trying to get across, but I guess just like us thinking about it right now, I just kind of had that thought. I was like, it just seems kind of strange that just because the father's success means that no one else can be happy. But no, I think you're right. That's definitely.
But like the father has a major impact on their family, so like it makes some sort of sense.
Right, because he's happier, he's more self-confident, he's probably going to instill that value into his family, so that's probably
and he's got a different job too. Like instead of working with Biff, he's an author now, so that in turn gets Lorraine less stressed out, so she doesn't drink, and then of course the rest of the family of course follows with that.
Well, let's take a moment to think about this here, fellas. If Marty McFly was already so cool based off his dad not being that have that much self-esteem, him having that self-esteem, What kind of level is Marty McFly beyond that?
Dude,
That's
Michael J. Fox would kill Michael J. Fox in the past to succeed him in the future.
maybe he did. We just didn't see that part of the film.
Holy shit, dude.
There's a conspiracy theory. Please check that out on fanfiction.com. All right, so moving right on here. I think I want to talk about Robert Zemeckis a little bit here, the director of the film. So he directed all 3 of the Back to the Future films, part of the trilogy.
It's good to see, director staying true to his own work.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the film was massively successful, so it made sense to maybe make a sequel or, take it to a trilogy status. But also the movie plans it up for a sequel. Like, there's a huge cliffhanger, pretty much, which is kind of funny thinking that there was a 4-year gap in between the first and second film. That's a lot of anticipation for another movie. Like,
especially when the movie ends the way that it does.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, yeah,
4
absolutely.
years is a pretty long time, honestly.
I mean, Doc Brown shows up. He's like, Marty, you need to come with me. Bring your girlfriend. And they just dip right away. Right? Marty's been back for all of 5 hours back to his present timeline?
Like, maybe if that.
If that. Yeah, well, he wakes up, he goes downstairs, talks to his family, walks outside, sees his 4-wheel truck that he was,
That truck
eyeing
threw me
down.
off a bit. It didn't seem like a Marty truck, I'll be honest.
Honestly, like back in 1985, that was probably the shit to have.
You think so? I mean, fair enough.
Like,
I know I'm almost nothing about cars except that some cars have gull-wing doors. That's pretty much all I really know.
wow, so you just learned some things about cars today.
Seriously, fact-checked it during the breaker. That's pretty much what happened. One thing that's kind of cool, though, about the sequels in this film for this franchise, 2 and 3 were directed and created at the same time, filmed during the same schedule. So number 2, for those who don't know, is in the future, and number 3 is kind of, I would say, the black sheep of the franchise. It's kind of it goes to a Western setting. It's not a bad movie, but it's the weakest, I'd say. Like,
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
100%
Yeah.
the weakest.
Yeah, it's not bad. There's still some good scenes. It's interesting. Like, I think just the
there's some-
characters are
Marty's still a
enjoyable.
badass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The characters are
Shit.
fun to watch.
And there's
least.
there's some classic scenes in like that have been referenced in other films. In number 3, that is the barn where Doc Brown is working. Slides open and someone gets a peek of what's inside. You guys
Right,
remember that
yeah.
clip? Yeah.
And I
so-
think that's a cool homage to like old Western films too. Like they did a good job at that movie.
Yeah, it
It's,
makes that cameo in 1,000 Ways to Die in the West.
Yeah, exactly.
He goes and looks in the barn and
Yeah, Doc Brown's.
Doc Brown's fixing the DeLorean.
Yeah,
I never saw that film. Was that a good movie?
I thought it was pretty good.
It's a typical
Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane film.
Yeah.
So it's like Ted 1 or Ted 2. Like what kind of scales?
Kind of. Except they're in the West.
Is it more
Yeah.
Ted 1 or is it more Ted 2?
More Ted 1, but very more wordy, but in a different style.
All right, I can feel that. Liam Neeson's okay. Anyways, all right. So back to talking about, I guess, trilogies. I kind of wanted to bring up, like I was saying, they were made at the same time. I think it's cool that a movie like that can still keep that level of attention. Like 4 years is a pretty long time. Like we don't get
It's
a lot.
a cruel cliffhanger to give some fans.
Completely.
Yeah.
4 years.
And you don't get that a lot in movie like history, really. I mean, the one that is kind of in the works right now is the Avatar sequel, right? Like James Cameron's directing Avatar 2 and 3, filming and directing at the same time.
So basically a similar way to what happened with Back to the Future.
Yeah, and I think
And what's the time gap?
That's where it's interesting, dude, is because Avatar came out in 2009, which is crazy to think already, to be honest with you. And Avatar 2 is slated for 2017.
Huh.
So that's like an 8-year gap.
Doubling the gap.
So that's double as long as, that's twice as long as Back to the Future 1 and 2. And number 3 came out a year after, too, so it wasn't a very long wait at all, actually. It's pretty reasonable.
I mean, Pocahontas is a great movie, dude. You know,
So good. Honestly, Pocahontas 3 Avatar, great movie. There's actually a sequel to Pocahontas on direct-to-DVD if you guys want to check that out. Anyways, yeah, but again, Robert Zemeckis, his direction in this film is pretty fun because I think it's whimsical at the same time, but it's also, it does a good job of taking itself, maybe not its subject matter serious, but just how it presents itself and its universe. Like it does really good world building. The way it describes like the town and the 1950s, it's really well directed. I think that's where this movie shines in terms of direction.
yeah, and I think you're right. The character development, though subtle, is really quite good. Like you even have a sense of what the principal's like just with the 2 scenes that he's in.
Yeah, I think you're totally right about that.
Yeah, and he just shows up briefly, right? Says a couple of words, and you kind of already have this idea of who he is in your mind.
It's true.
Right, and they reference his bald head at some point. You know, they add depth to the character throughout the movie, which is very cool.
I have a question for you then, man. Like, hear me out. Do you think that since we've like seen, I guess, 30 years of cinematic tropes since Back to the Future 1, that because of that we kind of understand who those characters are? Like, do you think if you were watching this movie for the first time in 1985, we wouldn't quite get like what their characters are like as well as we do now?
Oh,
You see what I'm getting at?
You think like film since then has like reflected its style or have been affected by this style? And
Yeah, and so when we rewatch it now, we have a better understanding what those characters are.
potentially,
I'm
but
kinda
it's
thinking
it's
that.
it's,
But I
it's
think
hard
it's beneficial to
to
this film's like direction, honestly.
right.
I don't think it's really a hindrance, nor is it really like the film. I don't think the film was worse in 1985. Obviously, $400 million later, like.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one way to describe this movie, it's just really well balanced.
Yeah,
you know,
you're right.
The conflict is well balanced with the character development, and the comedy fits in nicely.
The flow of the movie's just balanced, and it just works perfectly.
Exactly. Yeah, it flows so well. Like it keeps you entertained the entire way through, and you're begging for more scenes by the time the end comes around.
And yeah, you're actually so right about that, because I think you don't really want to see these guys go. And I think just knowing that 4-year gap exists makes me feel really bad for everyone in the theater in 1985. But when you watch the sequel, it's also seamless. Like the transition between the two films, the continuity is like
Takes
top-notch.
off right where it left off.
Yeah.
Except you're right about the girlfriend. Like the fact they changed the actress is pretty hilarious.
She's a minor character though, kind of.
Well, she's minor in the first film, but
She takes on a bigger role in the second one.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
you're totally right.
Maybe that's why they did change it up. Who knows? Mind you,
Most people probably didn't notice. I mean, you didn't notice, so.
Yeah, I didn't notice. Mind you, I haven't seen any of the movies for at least 5-6 years.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too. Besides watching part 2 not too recently. One thing I wanted to say though, Dan, you might actually have a bit of like, what's your thoughts on Robert Zemeckis? Because this guy's directed one of your favorite films of all time, Forrest Gump. I'm not even joking. I know that's one of your favorite movies.
Well, I've actually never really looked into him that much as a director, to be honest. There's some old, long-time favorite movies.
I think just like looking at how Forrest Gump is directed and like seeing how well that movie fits together, you can kind of see where he built upon that in this film. I just think that was part of his legacy overall. You know, look at Forrest Gump, look at the Back to the Future. Those are two huge films in cinematic history, and Zemeckis was definitely, you know, he's part of that, and he always will be known for those films, definitely. But I guess Back to the Future wasn't his only first successful film. Romancing the Stone came out a year earlier, and that did really well. But I think overall, I think you can see these two films, Forrest Gump and Back to the Future, kind of show that level of creative direction where they fit together like a puzzle piece. Everything doesn't feel forced or jammed together. Nothing's jigsawed, but everything definitely fits together really well.
Creative, emotional at some points, and he's got really a whole different range of film. Like he's got the dramatic, he's got the romance aspect, he's got the comedy, you know, he's got that, you know, fight or flight or like that action aspect in a lot of his movies as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see in a director that can take films to you know, that amount of depth and without messing with the movie, right? Like holding the flow and keeping so consistent to the message and the storyline. That's really cool.
I think even the structure too is a good point.
Yeah.
You could build off what you were just saying there. Like he is paying a lot of attention to like what the characters are doing and what like small details are important, but also looking at the structure of the film, he kind of maps it out on a cool web, almost like a web-like pattern that goes back and forth in a way that doesn't seem forced or doesn't seem kind of out of luck. It feels like it's strategically messy almost in a way. It just happens to work very well,
Right.
Which is neat. Devin, I think there's a couple fun facts about this film we kind of wanted to bring up that I actually had no idea about. And
Me either.
You were telling us about earlier.
Yeah, so originally when they were doing the casting for the first movie, they approached Michael J. Fox first as the role of Marty McFly, but he declined because he was shooting Family Ties at the time. So their second choice was Eric Stoltz, and they shot about half the first movie with him and decided that it wasn't a good fit and he just wasn't playing the role right. And so they ended up revisiting the idea of Michael J. Fox and offered him again. And this time, luckily, he accepted it because he couldn't really imagine anyone else being badass. Marty McFly as Michael J. Fox.
Not at all.
That's true.
They have this photo of Eric Stoltz on Wikipedia here, and he does not look nearly as cool as Marty McFly. Then again, I've seen Marty McFly literally turn a wooden scooter into a skateboard and skate around like a car chase. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
True. I think we're probably a little bit biased on this one, but
that being said, I think, you know, obviously I guess the director felt the same way, right? He knew that McFly or Michael J. Fox would be better in the role. One other thing about the DeLorean you were bringing up earlier that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, another weird thing about the movie was in the original script, instead of a DeLorean, it was actually a refrigerator, and Zemeckis thought that it would kind of promote kids to climb into the refrigerators, I guess.
I can see that, but that's kind of hilarious.
With the idea that they'd go time traveling, but luckily they changed it to the DeLorean.
Or probably hurt themselves. I feel like kids, in the 80s especially.
And it was like a nuclear reaction at a specific nuclear site was how he got back to the future. I'm not entirely sure on that part, but...
That's interesting. And I don't know if this is just me speculating, but... 25 years later, another Spielberg produced film, you get Indiana Jones coming out of a fridge, surviving, and came up the Crystal Skull. I don't know if that's just a weird connection, but
that's true. That's hilarious.
That might be a thing. I'm not sure, but
conspiracy theory. Check it out.
Yeah, please check out fanfiction.com. Also, I think it's a good point to bring up though that these little things that we all kind of notice, even the Twin Pines Mall. He brushes down one of the pines. He comes back and there's one.
Those are all really nice, tiny touches that really add to the quality of this movie for sure. And
it's kind of one of those interesting things, too, where I feel like over time you keep hearing more and more about Back to the Future. This movie doesn't really leave the popular conscience. It kind of lingers around, but because it's just good. I think a new generation always is going to want to revisit this film and experience it for, another lifetime.
Yeah, and this is definitely a movie that's going to stick out in history and not necessarily breaking any huge grounds in film, but it's just such a well-told story. It's a masterfully told story.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, man. I think if you look at this movie kind of just based on when it was made, and I think Zemeckis and Spielberg just looked at what was creatively popular and what was also really feasible to make, and they just kind of got the best people on their team to make that film.
Yeah.
And I think the concept alone is so simple, and that's why it is so great. Mm-hmm. It works really well in that way that it doesn't try to make things too convoluted, especially as far as about time travel. If you guys have seen any of the Terminators other than Terminator 1 and 2, you would know that things get real complicated real quick with time travel.
That's 100% true.
I actually haven't seen Terminator Genesis, but it just sounds like it would give me a headache.
Man, I was even confused in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
That's a good point. Honestly, that is great movie. But also, time travel is pretty weird in film, and I think this movie that focuses around that concept does a really good job of not confusing the audience.
It does get a little bit confusing when you get into the second and third episodes.
That's true. I guess that is
there is a lot going on. You have to really think back to what happened before and then what's happening now and what could have happened in between, sort of thing.
That's a good point, true. And I guess I could see myself being being in that audience in 1989 and having waited 4 years and not really probably having home video at the time and not remembering some of these things,
just being super confused going into this film.
That's probably very accurate. But
well, I mean, thinking about how you would do the sequel, I think after the movie came out, its natural progression was to, just the way they leave you at the end of the first episode, right? They're jumping into time travel again right away. It is evident that that's a huge part of the theme in the film, and it's almost obvious that that's really what they're going to show off and play around with in the next movie.
I think you're right, and I think the more we talk about the first film, the more I see flaws in the second.
Yeah,
which is kind of weird.
Agree.
There are little flaws here and there. There's times when there's 4 DeLoreans in one place at once in 1955 type of thing.
That's so true. I think for me, I guess maybe the theme and setting of the second film always just was really interesting and kind of fun for me to view, but
the idea of hoverboards and it was pretty creative still, but
I'm pretty sure Jay Stack's favorite Back to the Future film is Back to the Future 2.
Hoverboard. Check out our boy Jay Stacks.
Shaka brought to that guy. Yeah, I guess you're right. That is kind of true. You kind of see these things that seem kind of I guess they seem really cool in concept maybe, but over time I think a more back to basics approach in a film about time travel is a lot more effective because it is such a zany concept, but yet the first film feels so grounded in what it is. It's not really trying to be anything more than that,
right? Which
is pretty cool, and I think that's its biggest benefit.
Yeah, and maybe the second one's biggest flaw because it has so many ideas, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
I feel like that part of it is what's getting popularity for it now is the fact that the idea that they had in 1985 of what 2015 would look like is so skewed from what it actually looks like.
Yeah,
is what gives it the popularity it is now. It's just like, oh, it's funny that that's what they think that it was going to look like, but it's almost nothing like that.
Right.
That's true, because I think you can. I mean, by the time the third movie it came out, like 91, you knew that future wasn't real. Right? Like, that's kind of, I think it's a good point to bring up. Like, you could tell. I mean, as soon as I saw the movie, I knew that the way that the second film depicted the future wasn't accurate. Like, I don't know how old I was when I watched that. I was probably fairly young, but even then I knew that this is not at all what was 2015 was going to look like. It just it wasn't realistic.
And I mean, you know what though? Like, even though that's not what the future looked like, I mean, how can we expect them to know? You're right, it does take away from the film just because we do know what 2015 looks like, but making it, how can you know? And I think, maybe it's a good idea to look at more of the flaws, for example, the Ford DeLoreans in different scenes. So the fact that there's too many ideas
but I think
shoved
bringing
into
up
one
the time
movie.
thing is just actually maybe a good point as to why it's still really relevant. Everyone still thinks it's interesting. The fact that they took a chance on guessing what the future would be like makes it fun to watch.
There are some little things that are true about the future, like the keypad, like the fingerprint things on the doors, like iPhones have that now type of thing.
That's true.
It's like small details that actually are true, but for the most part it's pretty skewed. Also,
Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is Marty McFly's boss in the second film, which is still a really fun fact for y'all. He's an actor. I don't really know. Yeah, but I guess maybe like us just talking about this trilogy or like its legacy is a really interesting thing to say that like in 2016 we're still really talking about these three films that were made quite a long time ago, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to talk about old films, or that it's bad generally, but I like the idea that there is a franchise that is so relevant still to this day, because like I feel like an idea of a franchise in modern day, they're either so like played out by the time you get to a third film or even the second. Really, I mean, when you try to start a franchise now, it almost always kind of falls short. Maybe
it's overplayed or overkilled, or
maybe
one
with
of
like
them
the exception of Harry Potter, I guess, or like something that's based off of previous material. But I guess that kind of gets you into the whole superhero thing. We've talked about that into length at this point.
Let's stay away from the superhero topic, at least for this cast.
I
mean, Marty McFly is kind of like a superhero because he's so badass, but
honestly, if someone asked me what my favorite superhero was, I'd say Marty McFly.
What's his power? He's badass as fuck and plays the guitar.
Honestly is. Ryan Reynolds, watch out. I think you guys are right though about how, or Dan and Devin, I think you guys make a good point just talking about like what little things in this movie stand out over time based on when you're young and when you're old. And I think the fact that is kind of how we're talking about this film was interesting, because that's kind of how the movie puts it, right? It's like what's in the future, what's in the past.
Right.
And like I think the idea of nostalgia is really interesting. And I think although this movie doesn't really like tread on what's nostalgic towards Marty, I guess more so in the second film, you kind of get that. It's cool to see maybe like his parents' point of view on nostalgia. Like when they talk about like things they did in the past, like, oh, those are the good old days. Like, and you get to see the good old days. That's actually a really cool idea. And I think this movie, although like I keep saying this, like it's a very simple concept, but it's smarter than it needs to be, honestly.
It's a simple concept, but just the way that they went about doing it and the things that they did is what makes it so good.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to bring up... Actually, I forget what I wanted to bring up, but great movie.
Well, on that note, I think it's a good time to end this week's episode. Thank you so much for coming and checking us out this week. Thanks to our friend Devin for being on the cast.
Yeah, hopefully I'm back for part 2.
We're excited, man. We love it. Part 2 is a good time. We brought it up a lot on this episode, but honestly, I'm down to do that another time. But please be sure to check us out on YouTube, subscribe, like and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias. Oh, big shout out to Athabasca Bain Development for hooking us up this week. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to also check us out on iTunes and all the podcast sources out there. Stitcher if you're an Android user, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for checking out the cast. We'll talk to you later.